Hey, Spencer here with Loop, and in this video we're going to break down how Loop connects to Hubspot for call logging, click to call, and screen pops, show you a couple examples, and hopefully set you up for success in your sales future. So let's jump right in. I'm going to assume that you already know what Loop is, how it works, how to install it, and so obviously it's a Chrome extension. It's installed right here in the browser. And one important distinction I want you to understand is that this runs in AWS. It is not a desktop client. That basically means we're going to log calls for you no matter what, whether you have internet connection or not. So as soon as what we're about to do is configured, and it is then saved in the AWS environment, which means you can walk away from your PC or take calls on your cell phone. As long as they show up in your API calls, we'll be able to log those for you 24/7, similar to your NetSapiens or Cloud PBX environment. So jumping right into it, we're going to skip a lot of the features and hop right into HubSpot. You're going to notice here, if you click settings, depending on which version you're on, there should be a call logging submenu with a couple different applications here. In this example, we're going to connect to HubSpot. We're really proud of how this turned out because it is dumbed down all the way to a toggle switch. This is important distinction because once I hit this toggle switch and on my other screen, a little window will pop up, and we use single sign-on with HubSpot. And so I'm going to go ahead and kind of go through this here. Sign in with Google, HubSpot, there we go. And so now I'm signed into HubSpot. We don't need two-factor authentication. Skip the setup. Oh, what did I just do? Oh, okay. Well, it just asked me to sign in. And so you notice I exited out of that and it's not on. We're gonna go ahead and click that again since I had to go through a sign-in process. But take a look at this. So we named our integration on the HubSpot marketplace phone system. And so this says connecting phone system to HubSpot. And then you're going to go ahead and select your HubSpot account. You click choose account, and then that's it. So super simple, super duper simple. So if you notice there, a lot of things just happened. You probably didn't notice, but a lot of things just happened in the background. First things first, we use single sign-on with HubSpot. So what that is an important distinction to make because it's token-based authentication, which means as you sell upstream, they're going to start to care less and less about the actual integration, and they're going to start asking you security related questions. It really just depends on how many seats you're selling to, but I've found the higher you go, the more security becomes a concern. The reason I'm telling you all of this is because since we're using token-based authentication, we are not storing any crucial HubSpot username and passwords inside of our tooling, which also allows us to dumb it down to just a toggle switch. So what ends up actually happening is we send an API call to HubSpot and say, is this a real user, one, and two, do they have permission to update call logs and activity inside of HubSpot? And so that's an important distinction because one, again, we're not saving any data in here. And then number two, when they authenticate, you can't authenticate if you can't log into HubSpot. So if you click one of these buttons and you don't have sign in, it's not going to work. Number one. And then number two, once you're in, it not only connects to your HubSpot company account, but it connects to the user account, which is awesome. And the reason that's awesome is signing into Loop using your single sign-on with your PBX provider, we can basically attach to your seat, right? And then when you sign into HubSpot, instead of just assigning it to the company, we assign it to that specific user's seat in HubSpot. So basically, these call logs go for this user in HubSpot. Important distinction to make because if you ever want to build out any reporting inside of HubSpot, inbound calls, outbound calls, date, time, duration, that kind of stuff, you're going to want to be able to build it out at the per user level instead of just looking at all the call logs at the domain level, because then you won't know who made what calls. On top of that, What happens in the background, before I get too far into it, is every 5 minutes we check your APIs and we see if you've made any new phone calls. If you have made a new phone call, it'll show up in your API records, right? And then for call logs, and then we're gonna check that DID against the DIDs in HubSpot. So we send an API call over there. We say, hey, are these phone numbers inside of HubSpot? If they're not, we do not log activity for numbers that are not inside of HubSpot. And the reason for that is we would have to create a contact, and we do not alter or create existing records inside of HubSpot for a number of reasons, but the main one being we don't even know who they are, right? So it would just be like unnamed number. And then number two, once we get that call and the DID does match, we then log the activity as a timestamp inside of the calls inside of HubSpot. So we find the DID that matches, we log that activity. All of that happens in 5 minutes or less, and it's constantly updated after a call ends, right? And we wait till after the call ends so that way we can get the duration. So showing you what that looks like, the integration side of it is rather simple. You just click this toggle switch, and we do a ton of heavy lifting in an AWS environment on the back end. But as far as the user experience goes, it's a toggle switch. It's super easy. This allows you to onboard thousands of users in a matter of minutes just by saying turn it on. Also, if you're already signed into HubSpot, it'll skip the authentication step because they already know. So kind of cool on that. Let's go over to HubSpot now. HubSpot.com. We're going to go to my account. And then we are going to look up phone number. Boom. Spencer. Boom. And then, so this is what our information looks like in HubSpot. So in a typical HubSpot account, right, you've got, the name, you got the email, and you'll have a phone number. What we're actually doing is logging activity under the call section, but it shows up under all activities. And then we basically do the direction of the call, inbound or outbound, the number that was called, or the number that the calling, the date, the time, and then the duration. And believe it or not, this is actually technically logged twice. It's logged once as a data set, and then it's logged once as a note. And the reason we technically log it twice, don't worry, it doesn't mess with any of the records, is because if you don't log it twice, it'll just say logged call, and this is actually a notes section right here. So if I click this, you're actually going to be able to see the date, the time, the duration. These are inputs that you can put inside of HubSpot, but what we notice is if you just log the activity inside of HubSpot and you don't put a note in there, it'll just say logged call and you don't see the specifics, right? I guess you could see it up here. By putting the log call also in the notes section of the activity, you can then see it in the activity field right here and read it without having to go in and build a report, if that makes sense. Hopefully that's not too confusing. But let's see, if we click this, you can see it's associated with the date, time, and duration, and then you can kind of change this on the fly. And so again, this automatically gets logged, and you can come back in time and see, who made what calls at what time. On top of that, you can build reporting on top of this data and then go from there. So that's how call logging works within HubSpot. It's super simple. Once it's initiated, it'll auto log the calls. If calls aren't logging, then there's a good chance that the DID doesn't match up with the DID in the API calls, or it just hasn't been a long enough time delay. Like I said, it can take up to 5 minutes. And that's how call logging works with HubSpot. Hope this was helpful. Oh, last thing, we also have click to call inside of HubSpot. So if you pop over to our click to call settings, you can turn on logo click to call, which will put your logo next to every number in HubSpot. Link click to call, which as you can see converts the numbers into a different format for the click to call. And then you also have quick call up here. if you wanted to dial that out. And then let's see. You can turn on screen pops. And I just realized this video is getting kind of long. So that's how our HubSpot integration works. If you have any questions, shoot me an email, spencer@looptv.com. Thanks.